Around 3 minutes past 7, waking up to some fairly big news this morning. The government planning to cut the UK's greenhouse gas emissions to almost zero by 2050. Now, in a world in which news is so often dominated by politics, a lot of people say this is the most important issue of our generation. So, is this the right way forward for this country? Now, that would mean emissions from homes, transport, farming and industry will have to be avoided completely, or where we can't stop emitting these gases, then offset by planting trees or in some way sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere. The UK is the first major nation to put forward legislation like this. It would mean that we would meet our commitments under the Paris Climate Change Agreement. But critics say the action is being taken too late and fear the target will never be met. Let's speak to Tom Burke. He's chairman of a climate change think tank, E3G. Good morning to you, Tom.
Morning, Rachel.
Do you support this move, first of all, by Theresa May?
I think it's a really important move. It's a very good thing for the government to have done. And what's interesting about it, at a time when everything is so polarised, this is an initiative that's really got everybody coming in behind it. The TUC, the CBI, as well as Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg. This is something that, in a sense, brings all of us together, which makes it welcome.
So businesses are buying into this now, are they?
Yeah, they are indeed. Not all the businesses. Obviously, if you're in the fossil fuel industries, this is an indicator that life is going to be very different for you in the future. But most of business really realizes that the risks of climate change are so great, it would really undermine our prosperity going forward. It's
a big challenge, though. How do we do it?
Yeah, we do it by basically putting the money where our mouth is, and by following through on this commitment to get the law in the right place by investing in the right things. And most importantly, investing above all in energy efficiency of our buildings, particularly our homes, because that will not only reduce our emissions, it will also help get people's bills down, and it will help reduce the burden on the health service of the fuel poverty in the way that really makes it very difficult for older people to thrive.
How much is this going to have to come from government? How much from the individual consumer?
Well, I think there'll be a mix of things. I think government's got to set the lead and invest. And I think where the government, first of all, invests, you'll find that private money will follow behind it. So it's not all going to be a big bill for the taxpayer or the consumer. But nevertheless, there'll have to be some contribution from all of us to solving this problem. As you say, it's a problem, the biggest problem facing our generation.
How much is it going to cost?
I don't think you can really put an accurate figure on that. I saw the Chancellor came up with the idea that it was going to cost $1 trillion, and then immediately Number 10 said no, it wouldn't. Because you're going to get lots of benefits that you have to offset against that big headline figure of £1 trillion, you're going to get lots of benefits in terms of reduction in energy bills to people, reduction in the price we pay for imports. So I don't think anybody's yet come up with a very reasonable idea. My guess is it may well turn out to be a lot cheaper to go low carbon than it is to go high carbon.
That's interesting. Just give us one example, perhaps, and I'm not talking about banning plastic straws or using paper cotton buds. This is much, much bigger than that. So give us one example of one area where the government will need to invest, the public will need to follow, and this will require cooperation from all sectors of the community, but something that we can sort of tangibly get our heads around.
Well, I think the thing that we most tangibly can get our heads around is the idea that we really should be building an electricity system that's based on energy efficiency and focused on consumers, so that not only do people get an energy bill through their front door, but they might also be able to get revenues. If we build that sort of electricity
system. How do you
do
that?
And you build that by relying on renewables and storage, by investing in a much more flexible approach to the way in which our electricity generation system is organised than we've currently used. We're still basically using the system we set in place after the Second World War. And we need to have a much more modern, up-to-date electricity system that makes use of deep data, makes use of the kind of analytics that we can now do. And those sort of things would actually bring together, in a structural sense, the way in which the utilities and consumers are working together.
So do you see more wind power, more solar power? Do you also consider nuclear as an option in that?
I do see more wind power and more solar power. I think nuclear is a very expensive way of generating electricity, and it's really not compatible with the kind of flexible system we need to build for the future. So I don't think we should shut down our existing nuclear power stations, but we shouldn't be too sad when they fade away.
Yeah. I mentioned this, the comments from Ben van Beurden, the chief executive of Royal Dutch Shell, saying that individual consumer choices play a large part in driving global energy demand. So he's saying consumers who eat strawberries in winter months and buy throwaway fashion are contributing. What do you do? I mean, you could go to almost any shop on the high street and say, you know, that's the cheap fashion. How do you determine, for people who are on lower incomes, are you going to take away their shops and say you can only buy expensive clothes? How do you drive consumer change?
Well, you certainly don't do it that way. You do it by actually uniting people, not dividing them. I think it's extraordinary that Ben van Beurden should be saying that, starting the blame game of saying it's not our fault, it's the fault of other people. So I'm not going to take that remark from him very seriously.
But how are you going to stop people buying a T-shirt for £2?
I don't think you're going to win this argument by saying this is about people buying T-shirts or not eating strawberries. This is an argument about how we structure our electricity system, how we structure our transport system, and that's what's going to make. But
we do know individuals can drive change as well, and consumer choices can drive change.
That's absolutely true, Rachel. It's absolutely true. And where people feel they can make a contribution, they should make that contribution. But the idea that should be the sort of central focus of the debate seems to me to miss the point about the fact it's what we do together that matters, not what we do individually.
You have many hats. You're a visiting professor at Imperial and University Colleges in London. You're a senior associate at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. You're also chairman of the China Dialogue Trust. And with that particular hat on, here's a text, and we get this every single time we talk about climate change. Rob says, unless China, India, etc. come in line and stop coal-fired energy development, our laudable efforts are futile.
So, unfortunately, I've only got one head so, to put those many hats on. But they're right in a sense to say that. But what they're missing is the fact that both China and India are already making major changes in the way they produce electricity for their people. In fact, China is the world's biggest producer of solar panels, and secondly, is clearly well ahead of the rest of the world in moving to electric vehicles. So what's wrong is not the idea that they have to play a part, but the idea that they're not actually doing something. And in particular, the reason they're doing that is not because of what we're doing, it's because both China and India are amongst the most exposed countries in the world to a failure of climate policy.
And is there a danger that we are, just as Chris termed it before you came on air, farming out our carbon emissions to other countries? So we're buying in those solar panels from China, we're buying in the electric cars from other countries. They're the ones producing, manufacturing, they're the ones emitting the carbons. It might be well that we can live our clean, green lifestyles here, but if other people around the world are producing all the goods for us, they're having to deal with the consequences.
No, then that's absolutely right. And we live in a world that's trading, and with 8 billion of us on the planet, I don't think we're going to reduce the volume of trade. What matters is we work together and we count emissions where they're produced and make sure that all of us are driving emissions down, not worrying about who's doing more and who's doing less. I think the blame game approach to this problem is really not going to work.
Thank you very much. Fascinating to talk to you this morning, Tom. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye-bye.
Tom Burke, who is chairman of a climate change think tank, E3G, which is third generation environmentalism. Your thoughts